Next, going into IT considerations and selecting tools to power your process. Really, there's three different mechanisms at a high level that we've seen that work for powering these programs. You have Google Forms or Microsoft Forms. You have Slack, and then you have dedicated tools like we provide Ideation. And what we found is that Google Forms and a Slack channel work well for 50 participants or less. With Google Forms or Microsoft Forms, you can do this internally or externally. Slack is releasing some new tools that allow you to go external. We haven't tested those yet. But normally, and from our suggestion, if you're under 50 people and you're only focusing internally, Slack can work. Once you go over that 50-person threshold, going to a dedicated solution, there's plenty out there. You don't just have to look at IdeaWake, but it powers internal or external processes depending on which you go with, and really helps with the automation of the critical processes, and have that in the next slide here. So the collection strategy that each of those supports, Microsoft Forms could be continuous or periodic. Teams and Slack, continuous only. Dedicated platform, depending on which you go with, would be continuous or periodic as well. And the benefits that you're going to see from Microsoft Forms are initial cost savings, but you don't have the ability to do collaboration. And really the number one driver, like I said, is transparency of these program successes over the long term. And so Slack allows for collaboration. Once you go over 50 people, it's very difficult to manage that transparency component. Hence why it normally works best for longevity of programs when you have a dedicated tool, when you're over that 50-person threshold, because it comes built in with the ability to do collaboration, transparency, and automation of the transparency activities, specifically keeping submitters and other stakeholders updated on status of ideas at scale. Only downside from using a dedicated platform, which is pretty self-evident, but they can be cost prohibitive to some organizations depending on your budget. We'll share this afterwards. This just helps kind of break down some of those critical processes or key steps in the process, and which is manual or not possible within a Teams and Slack or a spreadsheet, Microsoft Forms environment versus using a dedicated solution. Really, the main thing is being able to communicate progress to submitters right here. And we'll show you this later on in the presentation. This is the number one driver of success by far, which I have right here. So communication is the key to success. Just make sure if you elect to go with a non-dedicated platform, even if you're just engaging 50 people, you can receive a lot of ideas. You really need to make sure to have a solid communication and recognition plan in place. From that same state of employee ideas survey that we did, we asked what prevented employees from sharing their ideas. The number one thing was ideas falling into a black hole, and number two was not receiving recognition for ideas that had been shared previously, were the number one and two drivers for why people did not share ideas.